It's Chiefs and Raiders Sunday afternoon at Arrowhead Stadium, and to help us break it down this week, we welcome Bleacher Report's Matt Miller and also of Stick to Football podcast fame. And Matt, we've known each other a long time, and for me to get on social and see you traveling the country on your tailgate tour with your podcast, I know that you've worked so hard to put yourself in a position where you get to travel the country, tailgate, and talk about football. You're living your best life right now, bud. So all I got to say is cheers.
Let's make it sound like I'm actually working a little bit, not just traveling to 9 games a year, drinking beer with our fans and listeners and readers. But it has been a long haul, 10 years at Bleacher Report almost. So it's been fun. But yeah, it's great to be able to do that. And actually, this weekend, I'm taking a rare weekend off, and I'm just going to come to the Chiefs game as a fan, and I'm going to be incognito, not doing a podcast or handing out free koozies, just enjoying the atmosphere at Arrowhead.
All right. Well, do you want to let the world know where you're going to be in case you have some fans watching that want to come say hi?
No.
Okay. All right. Fair enough.
Hide this week.
If it wasn't for the Raiders getting handled pretty well by the Jets last week, losing 34-3, at least nationally, there'd probably be more buzz about this game. Now, locally, it's Chiefs Raiders. It's going to have some buzz no matter what the records are. But for both of these teams at this point in the season, to have this game mean something as far as the playoff picture goes, is how good is that for the NFL, knowing the historic rivalry between the Chiefs and Raiders?
Yeah, it's what you want. And I think, BJ, had this not been a week where we have Niners-Ravens really overshadowing everything, and even Texans-Patriots kind of overshadowing this. I mean, it's the best rivalry in football, in my opinion. And it's because of there's legitimate hatred on both sides of the field. And I think that is a big part of this. So the fact that the Raiders, even with the loss to the Jets, which was embarrassing and confusing in a lot of ways, they're still in the hunt. They're still close. The AFC playoff picture is very muddled this year outside of Baltimore and New England, and especially that wild card race. So this game means more than just bragging rights or the fact that Derek Carr's bad in the cold or the fact that the Chiefs don't lose at home to the Raiders. The AFC West is still in play, and I think that one of those wild card spots is still in play. So this is must win for both teams outside of it just being about this rivalry.
Yeah, and we saw it's been a while since they've played, and everybody gets so caught up in the week by week and what's happened recently that it's all the way back to week 2 when these two teams met, and the Chiefs were able to pull out that win. They started a little slow. Eric Fisher went down early in that game. The Chiefs didn't have Tyreek Hill, but we got to see the MVP go all MVP. 442 yards, 4 touchdowns from Patrick Mahomes. Now, the Raiders defense looks a little bit different than that first meeting, as well as the Chiefs getting some of those guys back offensively I just mentioned. But what are you expecting to see, and what are you looking forward to on that side of the ball with Mahomes going up against the Raiders defense?
Well, I think having the offensive line close to healthy is going to be huge because we haven't seen that, like you said, since really week 2. So I think that is a big key of how well is Pat protected, and then what does that allow him to do in terms of climbing the pocket, which was supposed to be, one of his keys for improvement this year. And it just because of his injury, because of the offensive line being banged up, we haven't seen that yet to complete fruition. So I think that's a key. The Raiders have been able to get after some quarterbacks. Max Crosby's playing very well as a rookie. Cleveland Ferrell, who is the number 4 pick in the draft, has talent. So you still have to worry about those guys. And I think that is one of the keys when the Chiefs have the ball is how well can they protect Pat, because the Raiders are going to bring pressure. They're going to try to get after you, try to frustrate you. And they have guys in the middle of that line as well. Maurice Hurst had a very good rookie year last year. PJ Hall is just a handle for any offensive lineman. So what they're able to do up front as far as Oakland goes is going to be huge for this. It's cliche, but like the Chiefs have to win in the trenches to get this done. Yeah,
and Jonathan Hankins, another guy up there who's been making plays. And you mentioned Maurice Hurst, because go back and watching that game between the Jets and the Raiders, I feel like that 15-yard penalty they called on Maurice Hurst was one of the turning points in that game. And I don't think that call was one that I don't think that was a call that they make very often. I think that they made a
a lot of those this year.
Maybe have made a mistake on that call, but I don't think any Chiefs fans can complain about that. But I do want to ask you about Crosby, because he's a player I know I asked you about throughout the pre-draft process, starting from the Senior Bowl all the way through the Combine, and his connection to Andrew Wiley. They both went to Eastern Michigan. They're good friends. I remember talking to Wiley about Crosby throughout the pre-draft process. But what's been the most impressive thing to you about perhaps the second best edge rusher and a guy who'd probably be getting more buzz as a defensive rookie of the year candidate, if not for that other pass rusher in the Bay Area?
Right, yeah, that Nick Bosa kid's pretty good. I think with Crosby, when you watched him at Eastern, he was raw, but he had height, weight, speed, and we saw that throughout the draft process. I mean, he was a really exciting player anytime you got to see him in one-on-ones or individual drills, but it was always, okay, he's raw. And we've seen his tape just dominating these small school guys. So how quickly will he be able to develop and translate to the pro level? And that answer was really fast. It took him about 6 weeks to get his feet under him, and he's been unstoppable ever since. But I think some of that credit goes to the Raiders defensive staff. They're putting him in good positions to win. We just gushed about their interior defensive line. Those guys are giving him a lot of one-on-one opportunities out on the edge. And the Raiders offense has also been, outside of last week, good enough to where they're putting teams in a position where they have to throw to win. And I think that with Crosby's speed and length, when a dude like that can pin his ears back and just crash off the line, that's pretty dangerous. Thankfully, the Chiefs have a pretty good right tackle in Mitchell Schwartz, and that's going to be a fun matchup to watch those two go at it all day.
Yeah, and on the flip side, to stay along that rookie class that Mike Mayock put together, and I know he's been given credit for it, and it's hard to say as somebody who covers the Chiefs to look at that rookie class, but they have performed well. And you got to start, you talked about Cleveland Farrell, but Josh Jacobs is 5th in the league in rushing right now. I believe he's just 43 yards shy of hitting 1,000 for the season. Do you see a path for the Raiders to win this game on Sunday where Josh Jacobs isn't the focal point at the end saying that guy had a big game?
No, I mean, I think for the Raiders to win, Josh has to be dominant. And that's because you're going to have to force the Chiefs into short field and turnover situations, which they don't do a lot of. Right. But I think for the Raiders to win, they can't just organically score with Kansas City. I think it's more about they're going to have to take advantage of any miscues that Pat and the offense might have, or any special teams flare-ups. Turnovers would be huge here. And so I think that's what you want to do as Kansas City, is keep the ball out of Josh Jacobs' hands. Put them in a position where Derek Carr has to throw to beat you. And then you can pin back with Chris Jones and Frank Clark and go after the quarterback. But you're right. Mayock did a fantastic job. His first time ever as a GM. Every player in that draft class, except for 7th rounder Quentin Bell, is contributing. So it's phenomenal. When you look at how do you build a team, how do you flip a team from, being the number 4 pick to being a playoff contender, you got to hit on those draft picks, and it's been very impressive. Foster Moreau's been great. He was a favorite of mine. Josh Jacobs was a top 5 player for me. He looks like he might be rookie of the year. So Mayock, played it straight to the vest a little bit with big programs and high producers who are high character players, but they have a good foundation for the future now.
Yeah, I know one of the hits for them that came from that game last week was Hunter Renfrow, who's out for the year now with the injury that he suffered in that game to his ribs and his lung. Showed his toughness, which I don't think anybody that watched him at Clemson is going to be terribly surprised about that. But this passing game with Derek Carr, and Chiefs fans saw it in the first game, is tight end Darren Waller. He's one of those joker tight ends, one of those big wide receiver types, but he leads them in targets, yards, receptions, all the offensive categories. How important has he been, and what's going to be the biggest challenge for the Chiefs in trying to contain him in the passing game?
I remember scouting that dude at receiver at Georgia Tech, and that's how far he's come. Battling some issues personally of his own. It's a testament to his work ethic. He's a tough cover, and I don't know, with the Chiefs having smaller safeties and Honey Badger and Juan Thornhill, how you want to match him up, because he is fast enough to run with those guys, but he's so physical that you get put in those mismatched situations, like you said, with the joker tight end. So thankfully, those guys see Travis Kelce in practice every day, which is a pretty good, indication of how they're going to be able to cover an athletic big tight end down the field. But I think that's where your pass rush has to be able to take away some of those. You can't let seam routes develop down the field. You got to take that away to where Derek is trying to dump things down, and that's where they're going to miss Hunter Renfrow, especially in the red zone. So get after the quarterback, and guys like Darren Waller can't be as much of a factor.
Let's flip back to the Chiefs offense a little bit. And we saw in the first game, like I mentioned, that Tyreek Hill wasn't in that game, but we saw Demarcus Robinson just absolutely go off and have the breakout game of his career there. We know what Travis Kelce can do. He's had huge games against the Raiders in the past. And I believe I put out on social the other day that he's 167 yards away from hitting 1,000 yards for the season, become the first tight end in NFL history to have 4 straight 1,000-yard seasons. And then there's other guys on that offense that can also step up and make plays, Sammy Watkins and different guys. If you had to pick one guy right now, maybe it's a fantasy football related question then, who's the one guy you think for the Chiefs offense from a skill position perspective is going to jump up and have a huge game on Sunday?
Yeah, I think it's Travis Kelce. And we've been saying this about the Raiders since they signed Derek Johnson. They're not good in the middle of the field. They don't have a middle linebacker who can cover tight ends. And with Jonathan Abram out at safety, they don't have a safety who can cover tight ends. So as much as we all love the vertical passing game and the speed of Ty and Meikle and Sammy, it's the middle of the field is where you can eat against the Raiders. So I think Travis Kelce has a big one. He'll get over that 1,000-yard mark, I think, this Sunday.
Yeah, they a lot of crossing routes from the Jets. And the one thing about that game, if Chiefs fans, if you didn't watch, is that as much as the Raiders made mistakes with some penalties that were questionable and then drop passes were a huge play in that game, it was also the Jets going out and making plays. Le'Veon Bell made plays in that game. Robbie Anderson, there were 50-50 balls that those guys were coming down with. So as much as you look at the final score and believe the Raiders just got blown out, and the final score they did, but the Jets also went out and earned that game, and those guys went out there and made plays and played fired up. But now we're going to go to the prediction. Do you have a prediction for Sunday's game? Because I know you're going to be there sitting at Arrowhead cheering like everybody else. What do you think is going to happen?
You know, I've been to a lot of football games this year, and I've only seen the home team lose twice. Stanford on Saturday and the Chiefs when I was at the Colts game. So I need a little redemption from our guys in red. I think the Chiefs win this one. I got 34-20 as a score prediction, but I'm hoping, with Pat and the offensive line back healthy, that this game gets into the 40s and we have a little bit of an offensive shootout.
Hey, it would be nice to get Patrick Mahomes back nationally in that MVP conversation because I'm biased. I know you're biased as well. I don't think he ever should have left. I know everybody's talking about Lamar and Russell and what they're doing. Pat missed a little bit of time, but he's going to have an opportunity over the next 5 weeks to remind everybody why you at least have to include him in that conversation. So,
hey, I'd rather have a Super Bowl MVP than a regular season MVP, so yeah, let's worry about that one.
There we go. I love it. Matt, we appreciate your time again. It's Matt Miller of Bleacher Report and the Stick to Football podcast.